So you were just a freshman when the pandemic started. Do you recall much from the start of the pandemic, and what do you recall about it the most?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I recall about the pandemic and kind of hitting like in mid March and kind of having campus shut down in the span of really a week and not coming back to campus was this like just sense of like, I don't know, distortion, I guess, because one minute we were, in class and the campus was, very lively, full of like thousands of students, and the next we were trying to plan for, I don't want to say unprecedented, but yeah, just this very odd and very uncomfortable phase of our lives, really. There was just so much anxiety and stress, I think, for me, just wrapped up with the concept of school, that the pandemic really forced me to slow down and reevaluate that, I guess, a little bit dysfunctional relationship.
So it sounds like the pandemic did kind of trigger sort of this reevaluation of your relationship to academics. Did it affect your mental or physical well-being in any other ways?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say as far as my mental health went, definitely, yeah, like most people, like very anxious, kind of depressed for the majority of 2020, and also that was not just because of the pandemic, but also because of the election and kind of the continuing impacts of climate change, which I'm still wrestling with. It definitely forced me to just reprioritize my mental health.
It does seem like a lot of things stacked on top of the pandemic. Like the pandemic was kind of this underlying thing that was happening behind all of these other momentous events.
Yeah, I remember like in December 2019, like there were like those horrible wildfires in Australia, and then like President Trump was like talking about like or was gloating about bragging like a military official in the Middle East. I can't remember what it was about, but there was worry that he was going to start a civil war. And then the pandemic came, and it felt like those things were just so far in the past. But then, especially like in August and September 2020, it felt just like this overwhelming sense of like stress and chaos because I remember walking onto campus and like the Cameron Peak fire was happening, and there was like and there was just ash in the air, and at one point the sky was just burned a fiery orange, and I was taking a history of or practice of public history class with Dr. Payne, and she had to stop teaching in class one day. She's like, I'm sorry, like I have to take like 5 minutes, like I can't breathe, like with the wildfire smoke, and we were in the military sciences building, so it was just an old, not very well ventilated building. So yeah, it felt like the wildfire definitely stacked on top of that, especially because it was the worst fire in state history. And then the election came along, and that, I think, just incited even more stress and emotions. And it felt like spring 2021 was a little bit of a breather, at least until like the Boulder shooting, because I think, and then that kind of created just this overwhelming, like these overwhelming emotions as well, because it was like, oh my god, like that's like we're in the pandemic, like I think I personally thought like, oh, like I guess that's the good, like that's one of the only good things about a pandemic is that there will be less like mass shootings, and for that to still happen, it was like, oh, like what is going on? So yeah, I think the pandemic's legacy at CSU will be like, it'll have a couple of different I guess angles to it. I mean, there's the research angle. I think helping develop like the COVID vaccine was a huge challenge and success for the university. So CSU kind of stepped up as a global leader in developing the vaccine and also kind of mirroring the public health guidelines that the scientific community helped put out into the world. So I think at CSU, for anyone who is here in March 2020, or really any person who came to CSU between March 2020 and like May 2021, there will be this, it'll just be like, it'll continue to be like a learning journey and a shift back to normalcy. For me, being a CSU student during the pandemic and then graduating in the first like in-person graduation ceremony since 2019. It's just, it feels like I've gone through this whole complete cycle of kind of like normalcy, and then pandemic, and then like pandemic but in-person classes, and then like finally like kind of back to like some semblance of normalcy, even though we'll probably be living with this virus for a while. So I think it'll continue to have just legacies at CSU well into the next 10 years, because students who are here or students who will be here in the future will be impacted by it on a personal, academic, and social basis, I think.